said no. Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. All right, we're close to time. I might go pee one more time, and then I'll be right back. Yeah, yeah.
Welcome to Fear and Trembling. I'm your host for the evening, Michael. Luke was supposed to be with us, but something happened to him a few hours ago. I'd like to introduce our guests for the evening. First of all, Jordan Castro, who is an author of the novels Muscle Man and The Novelist, and he is the deputy director of the Cluny Institute here at the Catholic University of America. And our special guest for the evening, Dasha Nekrasova, who is an actress, a filmmaker, and co-host of the Red Scare podcast. Thank you for being here. Let's give it up for Dasha and Jordan. Thank you.
Hi, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. You guys can come take your seats, yeah, no problem.
Thank you for coming to part one of our lecture series about the Antichrist.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I thought we could just get right into it. You know,
Yeah.
It's weird. I was at telling you I was at a. It seems like horror is making a sort of comeback, or maybe it never left, but I'm becoming more aware of it. Which is that I was at like a literary festival a couple of weekends ago, where there were panels every hour on the hour, and they were all probably half were about horror, and the ones that weren't about horror became about horror. And it was sort of this very weird kind of thin sort of thing where they were like talking about genre tropes and kind of this kind of almost perverse fascination with like vampires or something like that. But I also feel like horror can be this sort of site of kind of profound spiritual and metaphysical and existential exploration. That it's actually something more than just these like vampire fangs or whatever. But that it actually gets at something sort of deep. I was just sort of wondering. You're obviously your first film was a horror film, and I was wondering what got you into horror.
I've always been into horror, even as a child. I was always drawn to kind of like mysticism and macabre elements. And then I chose, my first film, The Scary of 61st Street, happened very naturally. As a genre, I feel like there's a lot of freedom in it that there isn't in more conventional or like highbrow. Because it's so ghettoized, it can be a kind of good Trojan horse for concepts that are less acceptable, I guess. Like I couldn't have made like a drama really about Jeffrey Epstein with the same like intent and tonality that I wanted. But I think, it also is a very like spiritual genre because it deals with death, and so even if it doesn't deal overtly with metaphysics, though it often does, it does deal with feelings of like uncanniness or like disruption.
Yeah, I was reading in preparation for this. I was reading some guy named Thatcher, I think, about Lovecraft. And he was like, "What if horror is not about the fear of death? What if it's about the fear of life?" And that's like, wow, that really like that kind of has like a ring to it. But I would notice, I mean, even in me and Pat rewatched The Exorcist the other night, and I rewatched Scary before this. And I noticed that for me, the actual horrifying things about it, like there's I mean, this is obviously a sort of trope in horror, but like, maybe not a trope, but I know like in Scary, there's a part where the kettle boils loud. And there's a part where like Betsy is like mixing her coffee or something. And then in The Exorcist, there's the kind of stuff where she's, the girl is like in the hospital and there's these like machines.
The Spinal Tap is
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
one of the scariest parts of the Exorcist.
Right, yeah, and to me, like, all that stuff is way more scary. That it's actually not like the death stuff that's scary in horror films, it's like people.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, there's like scary stuff in the mundane. Well, horror also, it's not, we were just talking about this earlier, it's hard to define because it's outside of it just being a genre, because it's, people might say it's like a feeling, but it's more than a feeling, it's like an affect that has tropes and modes. And that's why I think people are so fascinated with it, is because there's so many angles from which to approach it. And in The Exorcist, it's scary because, well, it's the unknown.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't read much Lovecraft, but I get the idea. It's like about monsters. Right?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
But
yeah.
like they're lurking kind of in, like, Lynchian, right? There's like kind of the idyllic, ordered world, and then there's like the chaos kind of lurking underneath.
There's something that busts in, yeah.
And that's like a through line, I think, in a lot of horror convention, is that something is disrupted.
Yeah. Yeah, something is disrupted. I mean, I was thinking too about one thing that interested me about horror, and actually I'm interested, so you made a horror film about like real life events. I mean, essentially. And one of the things that I was interested in, and I am interested in related to horror, is that we have these kinds of uneasy, what's up, dude? There's some seats up here, yeah. We have these sorts of uneasy kind of cultural narratives surrounding like reason and progress, or something like that. And horror is, there's a lot of different things you can do with it, but it seems like a sort of arena of unreason or something. And when we were talking before this, you said that you feel like you're interested in conspiracies and horrors related to conspiracies because you felt like it was people making sense of the world. And so do you feel like horror, yeah, say more about that.
Well, The Exorcist is The Exorcist was the first, not the first possession film, but it was kind of became canon, it became genre defying. The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, Omen are kind of the trinity of movies in that period, which was similarly also a time of like upheaval and like chaos in the cultural unconscious. And so I think the satanic genre came out of a response to that. But with scary, I mean, again, yeah, I really didn't think about it so much when I was making it. But thinking about it now, and thinking about conspiracies in general as a kind of like folk religion, that like in a secular society, in the case of my film, it's a very like post-internet world, that lacking kind of the religious faculties, people then still need to like make meaning out of things that they don't understand. And so with popular contemporary conspiracies like Pizzagate, adrenochrome, all this stuff like that, like people have a sense that something is really wrong, and that there is something really like evil. And so the way, then they grasp for kind of like, oh, well then these people must be lizards, they must be monsters. And of course they really are, but not in the way that people narrativize it, I guess.
Well, what did you think that you could do in a film, a horror film in particular, that you couldn't do, for example, with like posting or talking about it or something like that?
Well, I really was there's been a resurgence recently with the Epstein files not existing, I guess. But at the time when I made my film, he had just died, and I was really like shook by it. And so I felt compelled, I felt called to make my film because I wanted something to exist that would be like, I knew my film's a little bit about futility. It's about like not being able to know the truth. It's a mystery, but I wanted something that would be kind of like an artifact that had like an existential or an emotional truth to it. That it was about, the truth in the film is about how the Epstein stuff felt rather than like what was really going on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. How would you describe that it felt?
Well,
Horrifying. I mean, yeah.
Unjust, I guess. And my character, who's sort of the protagonist, I guess, in the film is, yeah, she's really preoccupied with like the truth. And her folly is that she thinks that she'll be able to get not only like the truth, but that she'll be able to obtain some kind of like worldly justice.
Yeah. It's
it was less about the, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It was less about like the salaciousness of the scandal and more about kind of just like, I don't know, to me it really, when Epstein died, it felt just like the CIA like slapping me in the face. Like it just, I was like, it's like, oh, it's so nakedly, clearly corrupt and everybody knows it. But at the same time, there's this super profound futility and like, that's why seeing people now, like 5 years after the fact, kind of going down the Epstein rabbit hole again. Yeah, I just think there's so much folly in it.
Yeah, and there's something sort of horrifying about it. I mean, I can't help but like when we were talking about doing this event, I mean, horror is something that I sort of only started thinking of. I mean, I've always liked kind of Henry James and Shirley Jackson and certain horror adjacent writers and stuff. But really, when I started just thinking the work, I was like, you know, like the experience that I feel like I often have of like thinking about social things or societal things is like one of horror, you know, or interpersonally, it's sort of like it's horror, you know. And I was thinking before this, we were talking about the sort of role of the abject and the sort of body and stuff, and I was like, you know, which I do think is kind of one aspect of horror that can be uniquely Christian is this sort of like interesting relationship with the body, but I and the way that the material and the invisible interact. But I was thinking like it's sort of horrifying to have a body, but it's also other people's bodies are completely horrifying. Like if you're in a social situation, you know, people's lips like touch when they talk, and their like tongue moves in their mouth, and sometimes it feels like you can hear them blink. And that's the kind of horror maybe that I'm interested in my own artistic practice. But it's like walking around with this lens on the book and just like, oh my gosh, this is yeah.
I think I've encountered the abject in the mundane often when I do laundry, because I share laundry units and you're just encountering so much of like other people's like residue, you know?
What? Where are you doing laundry?
Just in my building, you know. But you're cleaning when you are cleaning out a lint trap. That's like someone else's dust. It's not just fuzz. It's there, you know. It's there, like. That's why it's gross.
Okay.
You know. You probably don't do laundry. You probably don't do laundry.
No,
if you did, you know what I was talking about.
I do laundry. I just don't live in an apartment building, so it's
But yeah, you're like encountering other people's like bodily ephemera every time you are using a communal laundry space, and it is pretty gross. But that's why, Kristeva, Powers of Horror.
Oh yeah, whoever on Twitter was like, what did they say?
Oh, she probably hasn't even read that. Of course I've read that. The book's like this thick. Of course I've read it. And it's like easy to understand, but that's a big thing that she talks about is like what is unique. The power of horror does have something to do with abjection, which does deal with like liminality, boundaries, residue, the kind of like in-betweenness of things, like a body. It's like a body's like peak abject, a dead body is peak abject because it's like a human form that's no longer, something is wrong. And then there's like degrees of that. Kristeva even writes about like when you boil milk and it gets that film on top, if it gets too hot, like that's like viscerally gross. And it's because it's like this boundary gets created, this film, this like membrane, and everyone has like a kind of horrifying reaction to it on like a small scale.
Yeah. I have another example of horror actually related to milk.
Yeah.
Which is that one of my favorite literary theorists is this guy Victor Schwabsky, who writes about defamiliarization. He says that the value of art is that it makes you see the familiar anew. And one of my friends uses an example of the way that you can experience things when you lose, when you forget your sort of concepts related to them, and how this can sort of open up a portal that can at once be maybe awe-inspiring or horrifying. And he uses the example of reaching for, not looking, and reaching for a glass of what he thinks is Coca-Cola, and then putting it to his lips and drinking it, and it's actually milk. He's like, this is, that experience is sort of horrifying, where it's just like, this is thick Coke or something like that. This is like flat, like weird. Anyway.
No, there's, that's, I think, very horrifying, which is adjacent, I think, to like transcendence. Because anything that like is disruptive causes you to reflect.
Yeah, there's a I'm not going to be able to pronounce the Latin, but the Rudolf Alton talking about the sacred being at once terrifying and you're nodding, what's the word? That's right, thank you. That's right, yeah. Luke's always using that one. So, or Paul Tillich talking about how the holy always contains an element of the demonic, because of sort of maybe what you're talking about. But I did want to ask you how you think about your artistic practice as it relates to your faith. And your Catholic faith. We're here at the Catholic University. Give it up for the Catholic.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the little like quips I cooked up had to do with like supernaturalism in horror. But if you're a Christian, a Catholic, then the supernatural is like is realistic, as opposed to hypernatural.
Nice.
Well, that's a good question. My film was very kind of cryptically Catholic.
You said that a priest said that or something?
A seminarian friend of mine did, yeah. But I think any film that deals with any like metaphysical dimension, or in the case of my movie, it was like I wanted to show that like evil lingered and that there was like a spiritual realm that was real, and to take that seriously, I think is the idea of like Christian art is something I've been thinking about in preparing for this.
And what have you been thinking?
I don't know. I don't know where I really like land on it, because I think not every Christian who endeavors to make art is necessarily making Christian art. I don't know if I'm making Christian art. I think there's like an honesty and a clarity of intent that's important. But someone like Flannery O'Connor, I would say, she's a Christian artist. Her books are like very much concerned with like the gospel. I think with filmmaking, I think any kind of creative output entails it, but filmmaking more so, just because it's so difficult and complicated that you have to cooperate with grace. I, at least in my experience, felt that there was so much grace that I had to kind of cooperate with to get my film made. And that's partly why I shot on film, is because I felt a kind of like sacramental attachment to it. And because my movie is so like hyper topical and almost like a meme, that shooting it on film made it seem more meaningful than like content, like something digital. I'm getting, I forgot what my point was.
The fact is about Christian art.
Oh, right. Well, it's like at the same time being an artist is not a vocation.
You don't think so?
Not classically, no. We're not, right? There's priestly, there's monastic vocations, and then if you don't pick one of those, you kind of have to get married. And then anything else you do is like extra. But it's not, we're not called to be artists.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, you might be personally called to be an artist,
yeah.
but like we're not, there's no institutional vocation in which you're permitted to do certain things because you have,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
If anything, I think like crafts people have more
Wait, why? You're not...
legitimacy as Christians because they have less of like an egoic. In a way, being a Christian artist almost feels paradoxical because there's so much like egoic attachment that goes into producing something. It almost mocks God to make art.
I don't think
that. I'm just being. I'm just being provocative.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I was curious to hear how you thought about it because I'm also a Christian and make art, and I do legitimately wonder where I'm just like people have been like writing about my most recent novel and saying things like, I read it and it was kind of disturbing and I don't know if I enjoyed it. There is a fear, I think, or like an anxiety about sort of not pleasing God with your art, but something like that, I was just curious if you... I know you don't actually think that it's like...
no, I don't think... And I could make a totally flip, like, counter-argument where I would say that anything that a Christian does is art. I could go the opposite way, but that's where I'm landing kind of with it, is I have ambiguous feelings about it. And I think Flannery O'Connor's a great example because I think her books are really, like, creepy.
Yeah, my sort of line is I always say that like the thing, when I was becoming a Christian, a lot of people think about what, they think about what the Bible says about God, but I really first became convinced of the truth of what it says about people. And what it says about people is pretty, it says they're made in the image of God, but it also shows them doing all sorts of like terrible things, And that was like, that totally tracked onto my experience, which is like, there's people lying and scapegoating their brother and
the fall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's something about I just think that you can infuse art about the world with a sort of perspective from outside of it, and that sort of can be a Christianly endeavor.
Do you think you have to be would you consider The Exorcist to be a work of Christian art?
The perfect, actually, work of Christian art, yeah. If you guys haven't seen The Exorcist, I rewatched it the other day, and I was like, it might be there's Ordette and there's Babette's Feast, but The Exorcist is right up there, yeah, with, I think, maybe perfect Christian art. Film, I don't know. What do you think?
I would say so. Definitely it, but not made by a Christian.
Is that true?
And I'm not going to say what type of person, what type of filmmaker, what type of media industry. No. No, but a lot of filmmakers are either lapsed Catholics or had some kind of Catholic upbringing. Not in the case of The Exorcist. But yeah, I think it did.
Who made it then?
William Friedkin.
It's made, Pat was looking it up, it made like $500,000 in the 70s. Or no, sorry, $500 million, which was a lot of money.
Yeah, no, it was major. And it really, that's why Catholics continue to really dominate the exorcism genre, is partly due to The Exorcist. Largely, in part due to The Exorcist. And there really isn't a lot of like variation on that theme even still.
What are the other? They just get possessed or something?
Anytime, any movie where someone is getting an exorcism, there is a Catholic priest. And that's because of The Exorcist, but also because Catholicism has the perfect like visual vocabulary for depicting spiritual battle, in my opinion. And the hierarchy, and it's just a very like good, evil is very clear.
I actually I know non-Christian novelists who use Christian, Catholic specifically, characters and tropes because it instantiates like a moral, like a sort of comprehensible moral world. Whereas a lot of contemporary art, you actually sort of like, there's actually no clear markers of any sort of like moral world.
Yeah, exactly. It's everyone kind of is, even in America, understands it to be like the main one.
Yeah. That's true. There was did I tell you about what my priest said the other day? He was like I actually wanted to bust this out. Maybe this will spark maybe we can talk about this. In terms of the Bible, and oh my gosh, my dad just sent me a picture of my dog in a hot dog costume.
Really cute.
I want to pull this up. Actually,
the thing about
I'm going to do a little reading real quick, actually.
Okay.
That's fine. Unless was there something in your notes that you wanted to mention?
Oh, well, I wanted to circle back. I forgot to mention this, but my priest gave a great homily once.
We're just going to steal bits from our priest for the next 10 minutes, I think.
No, it was at my chrismation. After we had done, he catechized me. And at the time, I was kind of spurting a lot about like the Second Vatican Council, stuff like that. And he gave this great, but he gave a really nice homily about conspiracy and how.
Did he really? During your chrismation?
Yeah. Were you there?
I was there.
Yeah, he said the word conspiracy in Latin, conspiros, means to breathe together, and that's. So right, when you think of a conspiracy, you think about all these people acting like in a coordinated way, all in one breath. And he said the real conspiracy is between you and God. That every time you breathe, you and God are conspiring to like, keep you alive and fulfill your work on earth and stuff.
Nice.
He also recently said it's not about the history, it's about the mystery.
I thought you were going to say something totally different about the conspiracy. It seems like.
No.
So he was saying the Bible is about, or that Christianity is about the conspiracy of you and God breathing together?
Not Christianity. He was talking more, not Christianity exactly, but I think he was just talking in a more personal way.
Sure, yeah.
About one's relationship with God. What did your priest say?
He was this was like last weekend or something, or the weekend before, and he read the passage about the demons going into the pigs, and then he had a great quip about horror, which I just wanted to steal and actually read from the Bible. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. You can notice the Halloween themes already. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Interesting. Very interesting. Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many."
Oh, that's so scary.
Right? Okay, well, here, hold on. And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs. Allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And so my priest, this is a very long preamble to say that he said, it's full of tombs, it's full of evil spirits, it's full of 2,000 pigs rushing off of a hill. And the thing that made people afraid was the guy sitting at Jesus' feet. And so I think that I just thought it was an interesting kind of a thing, which is that there's something about, yeah.
Well, fear is a kind of reverential reaction. In one of my favorite epistles in Proverbs, it says, "Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom." And that hits really hard.
That's true.
For me personally.
But they weren't wise, though. In this case, I think they drove Jesus out. I think they might have been afraid in the other way.
Well, that's why it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't achieve wisdom, but
Sure.
knowing that there is a God to even fear. Again, but back to horror, that's why it is like a optimal Christian genre, is because I think the experience of fear, the rumination on death, are things that, as Christians, we ought to take seriously.
Are there we'll go to audience questions too, but are there films that you feel like you would recommend? And the way that you're talking about it is interesting. I mean, so you're sort of saying that horror is important for Christians because it makes them confront certain I'm a little confused.
I mean, no, not necessarily. I think you have to kind of already have, because you could be some pervert who watches scary movies because you are titillated by violence, or there's obviously slasher films that don't even have a spiritual dimension, that are basically just gore porn, which I also enjoy. As just I wouldn't have such a prescriptive maybe take on it, but I think it's valid. And that it deals with ancient truths.
Okay.
But if you don't, if it's not your thing, then whatever. I wouldn't be watch The Exorcist, because you'll see what the devil could.
I would, yeah.
I mean, it had a huge impact on me, because I wasn't allowed to see it, because they remastered it, or they did a director's cut re-release or something when I was in elementary school, and I remember seeing a preview for it and seeing Linda Blair go down the stairs in the back bend, and they flashed it on the screen briefly, and I wanted to see it so bad. I wasn't allowed. And then I had a friend whose parents got divorced, so I went to her house, and I watched it, and it really affected me deeply. So if you haven't seen it, I would recommend it, but I can't say necessarily that you'll have, a transcendent experience.
Yeah, I actually forgot. I did forget to say that there's lore related to that film in this building. that there was allegedly an exorcist. I heard someone whisper it's not true. Listen, man.
What?
Listen, dude.
No, not on Halloween.
Let me do my thing.
Not on
all right?
Halloween.
This is a night of.
Let's talk about something completely unrelated.
You better have been. Look, man, you better have been.
About some other allegations.
Okay. Anyway, regardless of what this demon says over here, there's lore that upstairs there's an exorcism room, and that it has something to do with the Exorcist, and that maybe someone when we were looking at with the special archives, this guy from Seaway was like, that could have been the window that he fell out of or whatever. So there is lore related to that here, and there may be even some evil spirits among us.
Honestly, I'd recommend the works of Malachi Martin to anyone that was curious about firsthand experiences of exorcisms. That, yeah, Hostage to the Devil gave me chills straight up.
Hostage of the Devil.
Hostage to the Devil, or his like one of his accounts of like his career as an exorcist. Yeah, I won't.
All right, we're going to open it up to questions now, the audience. I think someone's going to come around with a mic. I figured you guys had probably have a lot of questions. You can just pick whoever, yeah.
All right. So I rewatched the first Halloween last night, and I was kind of struck by how the movie is like very moral and spiritual, because it shows kind of like how we have these like modern structures like psychiatry, law enforcement, science, but these things are insufficient to contain evil. And yeah, I was thinking this is kind of like the horror for the modern world. And you guys are speaking of Flannery O'Connor, where I think there's another kind of horror, but it's not a horror of evil. Thinking of A Good Man's Hard to Find, the misfit is actually really afraid of Christ. He's afraid of the resurrection, because he says that Christ has turned the world upside down, and now he has to, if it's true, he has to make a kind of sacrifice. His life has to change, kind of going to Jordan's point of how horror might be a fear of life. And in fact, like, you know, Christ asks us to take up our crosses, which is kind of terrifying. So I was wondering if you guys think that horror is a uniquely modern genre for like a post-Christian society in which the supernatural, both good or bad, kind of disrupts our certainty that we can control reality and nature through our own powers, through whatever technology, science, politics.
I think that's very well put. And that's something, I mean, even in like Dostoevsky, there's always the kind of like bumbling doctor who's coming to like, who can't do anything because everyone actually has like spiritual affliction. But horror, yeah, I mean, I would say that feels true to me, yeah.
Yeah, that tracks. I mean, the Exorcist, same. It's very similar. They bring this possessed girl to doctors and psychiatrists and all this kind of stuff. And the horror is sort of that we can't sort of control or understand or with our own sort of powers the things that are going on. And I mean, to that I'll say, I mean, I do think that my favorite art is basically it deals with the irrational. That there's this, and I think it sort of goes against the kind of, like I was saying before, the dominant cultural, really delusion that we are fundamentally rational. I know Catholics, there are certain Catholics that would take issue with that framing, but my favorite art sort of gets beneath those stories that we tell ourselves, and I think, like, for example, AI is a good example, which is that you have this machine, it sort of can do a bunch of like rational tricks or whatever, and like mimic rationality, but deep down, all the art we make is about horror, the machine and all this kind of stuff, and so we kind of sense it, and art, I think, is a good place where that sort of bubbles up and out.
You mean like the grotesque AI stuff?
No, the grotesque AI stuff is awesome, though.
No, but that's what, that it's like, that's, I think, when it's at its most compelling.
That's true. No, I was more thinking
like
about...
it's better at generating something grotesque than something beautiful.
That's true. That is true.
And this is a point I make, it's one of my, like, I repeat this often, but part of my skepticism with AI is that I don't think it will ever, even if it can replicate consciousness to a certain level, it'll never replicate like sub or unconsciousness, and that's where we'll find its like real limitations, especially as it pertains to making art, is because those things happen like out of the rational mind, in my opinion.
Whoever.
Hi. This is sort of like going off the AI question, but recently there's been, like Dasha, you mentioned this is your joke to open it, the Antichrist talks, but there's been like this concern in Silicon Valley of like the Antichrist. Do you think that like we're using all this energy to like summon this demon that knows everything and is ostensibly good because it helps us solve problems, but is like actually evil? Like, could AI be the Antichrist? That's my question.
I think that there's a lot of incentive for people who have a lot of invested in artificial intelligence to make it seem more like doomsday than it is, really. But I'm not so convinced.
I think I'm not going to answer this question.
One of the features of the Antichrist, people were like, "Oh, is Peter Thiel the Antichrist?" It's like, well, the main feature of the Antichrist is that everyone's gonna like him.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
The Antichrist isn't gonna be scary. You're gonna be like, everyone's gonna be like, "Wow, this guy's got great ideas. We're all on board."
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Like the fact that people even are scared of AI or are scared of like, Elon Musk is in the Antichrist. He has zero riz. He can't. The Antichrist is gonna riz you up so bad you won't even know what hit you.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well put.
Let's get that cute kitty cat over there. Let's see if she...
Hello, thank you. So I wanted to go back to, I wanted to mention as well, in the Orthodox Church, which is I'm from, we have exorcisms as well. It's just not as much talked about, and you need like, it's kind of like the same thing. I guess Catholicism did popularize it in that sort of sense, but no, we have the same thing.
But as a genre.
As a genre,
they
no.
don't.
She was looking it
as
up.
a genre.
Yeah, she was trying to.
I actually did some research into this, and obviously in part due to like the Iron Curtain, and then Greece not having so much cultural output these days, they really haven't been able to like codify.
They don't really prefer to talk about it. I think it's not that they wouldn't, and there are interviews. It's just like, I guess that's not really what we focus on. We focus on the mystic side and stuff, and I mean that's cool and all. But yeah, and then my other thing was I mostly knew you through your debate with Jay Dyer and you talking with Nick Fuentes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, like, were you, how was talking with both of them, and especially with Jay Dyer, like, were you convinced at all, or maybe, I don't know.
Well, Jay Dyer and I didn't exactly debate, like, Catholicism versus Orthodoxy, because I didn't think that would be so fruitful. Because I'm an Eastern Catholic, I instead posited the idea that I was Orthodox. that I did hold the true faith, but I was also in communion with Rome. And no, ultimately I'm convinced, that unity is the divine will. But I consider Orthodox people to be Catholic.
We're healing the schism. Is that what's going on?
Yeah. I am. At least.
Schism healed. Thank you for your question.
I don't think so, yeah.
Hi. So you mentioned that in the 70s, satanic movies were really popular. They were really resonating with audiences. It seems to me that body horror in particular now is really resonating with audiences. Like you have The Substance, you have Titan, and others. And I wanted to hear if you guys had any thoughts on that, like why you think that might be the case.
Well, I think with both of the examples you mentioned, at least, they were made by women. And I think with female filmmakers, body horror is particularly popular because women are pretty self-obsessed. So they aren't able to think as abstractly. And they focus on kind of like, what they find scary, which is like aging or, and then they like are able to frame it as, well, that's what those movies are about. I'm sorry. And I think they're good, I think they're pretty good. I think that is scary. But the body's always been a focal point of horror. But I think recently it's become more popular because there's been this push for kind of like feminist-coded horror movies. And so, they deal with more immediate human experience.
Hi there. I'm wondering if either of you have seen the latest film in the Exorcist genre, which was The Ritual with Dan Stevens and Al Pacino.
No.
I was hoping you had. Okay.
No.
It got like really terrible reviews.
When did that come out?
June.
Oh no, I had no
It's
idea.
like about a real life exorcism that happened in Wisconsin, like within the last few decades, and so it takes place in like the modern era, and I don't know. I haven't seen it yet myself. I was hoping to see if it was worth seeing because.
You're asking it.
I'm sorry?
You're just trying to get a full-blown, just like...
You just want to see it? You haven't even seen
Google
it?
for that,
What's your
dude.
question?
What's going on here?
I was wondering if you'd seen it because...
That's your question?
I'm sorry.
And you haven't even seen it? What was going to be your follow-up?
I'll give the mic back.
Thank you. Happy Halloween.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Hi. So this might echo her question a little bit from earlier, but one of the interesting things I find about horror is like to what extent it reflects the anxieties of the times. Like in the 60s to 80s, you have like a lot of serial killer, like kind of slasher films. In the 90s in Asia, you have movies like Audition that are very much like about their dealing with consumerism, things like that. So I haven't really myself been able to find like a common thread in current horror, and was wondering like, what do you think we're afraid of now? And do you find that represented in horror in like a satisfying way currently?
I think that there's a broader problem with cultural output in general where it's a lot of pastiche and a lot of rehashing. And there's just not a lot of original ideas. I mean, Ari Aster, he's scared of women. He's scared of his mom. And I think, I really like his movies, and they have, they really show to me, like Hereditary especially, because that's a movie that I thought of that I was like, oh, it does deal with like the supernatural, but in this very secular, it's like basically about psychoanalysis. But he's sort of an outlier. No, I think there's just not that many it's harder to
Like
talk about
reboots
broad
and
trends because everything's like rehashed and remakes or like using IP or whatever.
There's like Scream 5 or Nosferatu, and it's like, you
Yeah,
know,
everyone's scared of having an original idea. Is what it seems like.
Yeah, did you see Sinners?
No.
I mean, it seems like Pat convinced us that it would be a good idea to go see it a while back, and we went and saw it. It seemed like, I mean, I've seen that one. There's others that I'm forgetting, but
Well, Get Out.
Get Out,
We're
right,
scared
okay.
of racism is the real.
So that
really
exactly. That's the sort of thing that I was thinking about, which is that it seems like now, and this actually was the case at this literary conference that I was at, where people kept talking about horror, is that it seemed like they were interested in the tropes at like a very thin level. They're like, there's the trope of the vampire, and there's the trope of the creepy community, or whatever it is, right? And then they just superimpose theology into it. And so the reason why, where it's like, what if we had a cult? And the cult, illustrated why my ideological views are, there's like, or with Sinners, there was this, it was supposed to be like a vampire movie or something. The whole thing seemed to basically just build to the point where Michael B. Jordan is like mowing down these white guys that like you're supposed to kind of think are in the Klan, but they just get introduced. It's like this very kind of bizarre sort of thing. And like you get the sense that it's just using these tropes to basically do kind of some haphazard history or sociology or something, and it's really not a sort of, there's nothing horrifying about it really, except for the uncanny quality that this is supposed to be a movie, and instead I'm being lectured, So, yeah.
Thank you. One of the themes you discussed was the sort of quasi-sacramental nature of horror, that there's this sort of uncanniness or spookiness in touching upon God's presence. And this is why it's very appropriate that we have sort of Catholic authors engaging in horror, that it's a very Christian genre. But I wonder what you think of moving these ideas in sort of the opposite direction. Should Christian worship be more horrifying, or should it be spookier?
How so?
Well, making, I guess the thought is making the presence of God manifest actually would inspire a sense of uncanniness. And if the sacraments are about real participation in God's being, then shouldn't a properly sacramental kind of action make that manifest, and then inspire like a sense of like awe or horror?
I mean, ideally, I think you approach the Eucharist, with fear and reverence.
Yeah,
I think that's
I don't know. I can't really
what
say
you're
like,
meant to do.
Yeah, I mean, the question is like, should Christian worship be more this way? I'm like not qualified to answer that question or even really speculate, but maybe. I mean, what you're saying makes sense, And I do think, and I actually do think that because I'm a bit of converted as an adult, and like when I first became a Christian, it really was sort of like I said before, being convinced of sort of like almost anthropology of the Gospels, but then also like. There was this sort of initially a sort of like overwhelming grace and a sort of personal relationship and stuff like this. But then there really was this kind of thing where it was like experiencing this sort of like really almost like a horrifying awe, a reverence mixed with a kind of fear, and not like a fear of like punishment or something like that, but just of the actual sort of grandeur of God, and like and I do experience that when sometimes on Sundays, but I don't. I'm not going to like tweak the liturgy because I think it should be more horrifying or whatever. I don't know.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for coming to speak with us, both of you. I love both of your work. I wanted to ask, I love your question because I also wanted to ask about horror and faith. I personally watched your scary movies, but I was very scared the whole time. I'm a big scaredy cat. I was like clutching my seat. I want to appreciate art, like horror, as art. Symbolically, I can understand that, our hearts race. But I grew up in a very religious household where I was told that to represent these things that are very macabre, that represent, you know, sins in real life, death, murder, torture, is a sin. It's not a Christian idea. And I know you guys said you don't make Christian art, but I'm just really interested because there's a lot of talk about religion and horror tonight, and I want to see what your guys' take on that. I'm not defending that idea. I just want to understand.
I think, to bring up Flannery O'Connor again, she has a quote about how, yeah, the author's salvation might lead others into sin. And I don't know how much I identify with that personally, but I thought it was interesting that she saw, you know, that she engaged with very, like, you know, macabre topics. But personally, I don't think, and my understanding of it is that it's not sinful to depict sin, that you need a kind of intent to sin.
Yeah, we'll do one more, maybe right over
there. I'm not sure if what I'm going to say is accurate from the perspective of historical understanding of movie development, but it seems to me the classical era of horror movies that goes up to maybe the 60s always had an element of redemption in it. So the whole story was driven in some ways by, well, is the person deviating going to redeem himself or herself ultimately? You find this in Frankenstein, you find this in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you find it in many of the classical era movies. It seems to me that the modern period, like with Jason Blum and others who have produced movies that you've mentioned, that redemption aspect is gone out of the window and is not maybe as important. I mean, it reflects some societal development, I suppose, but I mean, do you have any reflection on this in terms of the importance of maybe what the genre would bring to society before, and now it's become just a fest of, as you were saying, like gore, you know, craziness or something, which is lacking meaning ultimately, in my view. But
to you, well, Frankenstein and Jekyll and Hyde are more even older than that as stories, I guess. So I think in general, yeah, there's been more of a nihilistic, but I don't think they're all, you know, even in the like I consider the golden era of horror to probably be like maybe the 70s. And even then they had, you know, more nihilistic kind of like slasher movies. And I think I don't think the genre broadly is diminished, but there is probably just a more nihilistic trend generally.
Yeah, I was thinking about it in terms of, and this is not really going to answer your question about horror films, but you know, my wife Nicolette is a novelist and was trying to write like a conversion narrative, you know, where the protagonist like you know, has an experience and sort of is redeemed, and we could not find a single one, you know, in literary fiction. I mean, Dostoevsky obviously does it, but especially contemporary. I think part of it is that there's this profound suspicion of like neat and clean endings, you know? Like even in The Exorcist, it's not like, I mean, the little girl gets freed of the demon, but only when the priest takes the demon onto himself and jumps out the window and dies. You know what I mean? And I think there's been this turn particularly in Christian art, it's something that bothers me a lot.
But isn't that a sacrificial
Totally, yeah,
act
totally.
on his part?
100%, yeah. I just mean that it's not like this neat, cheery way where, like, you know, I mean, my sort of gripe with Christian art in particular, it's like you have this sort of, yeah, like you said, nihilistic, secular art on the one side, where it's like just the horror, just the open-ended torment and that kind of a thing. You know, but then on the other side, you have Christians who are making things with these like sort of bubblegum sort of morality plays or something, like, you know, where it's just like, and then everything was good because, you know, they believed in Jesus. You know, it's like, and that is totally, people are totally, rightly I think, suspicious of that clean of a narrative, especially in the way it gets rendered as super garish and stuff. But I think we have to close. Thanks, and say
Thank
a
you.
round of applause for Dasha.
On behalf of the Cluny Institute and Catholic University, Dasha, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And one more round of applause for Dasha. And we have a reception until 7 o'clock with spiritual beverages and food. We hope to see you at the party. Thanks so much for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.